and it hasn't come out as to why yet, but RTM has a very kind of he's very disillusioned with the idea of romantic love because of reasons. And so, you know, it's not something that he ever has really thought about and ever really, you know, dealt with. And so, you know, the commentary that led up to that, it was more of a reaction to, you know, get the attention off of him and make everybody go, oh, okay, makes sense. Like, you know, the religious man doesn't have time for anything. But yeah, no, it'll make more sense as more of his story comes out. But no, he's not completely like only, you know, the church and only the church, the goddess and only the goddess.
So are these events that you are alluding to that, you know, we won't necessarily discuss at length, which is a part of the format we're going to have to decide if we want to illuminate some backstory for audience, but not for other players by doing the headphones off mute kind of thing. But are these events the similar reason to the fact that RTM clearly doesn't trust anyone? Even the people he's literally now, you know, put his life on the line with repeatedly?
Yes. Yeah, they're a lot of his quirks and his, you know, what is the word? The
eccentricities,
idiosyncrasies are all related to a very, you know, a handful of specific events that have occurred in his history. So
was she a noble?
No. The woman involved was not a noble.
Because that's another question that was submitted by Stay at Home GM, by Lydia, who plays Jelania. RTM has this major issue with nobles. It comes out constantly.
Yeah.
How classist he is, but against the ruling class instead of the poor class, right? And this week was a pedestal example of just how anti the nobility RTM is.
Yeah, no, this week was actually it was interesting for me as a player, but it was kind of trying for the character, because you know, he's literally surrounded by what he hates most in this world, you know, next to evil, and I guess it's the thing that he hates the most, like the third thing, because first is obviously Morpheus, because he's the source of all evil in his opinion. Then it's evil, and then it's nobles, because nobles to him are evil. And I mentioned it in the past, you know, a lot of his distrust and stuff comes not just from his personal experiences, but also just like he grew up in the capital city, and in all, you know, even unfortunately in the real world, a lot of big cities, you get your seedy underbelly that's kind of ignored by, you know, the higher classes, and that's what he grew up in. And so to him, it's like there's this whole section that's being completely ignored, this whole section of the populace. And I think it'll actually be interesting when we, you know, go into the city. I'm hoping we get the opportunity to go into the city and he can kind of take our Anya and Corvette and be like, look at, you know, look over there, look at that example of suffering, look over there, look at what you guys are neglecting, you know, and kind of have that interesting character clash, especially since
you're gonna go bring their Princess Jasmine's through Aladdin's life.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So yeah, no, it was definitely, it was an interesting experience this week for me.
So was there any part of being in the nobility house that you enjoyed, that he enjoyed, not you, that the character enjoyed whatsoever? Or did your personal prejudices as a character outweigh even the creature comforts that you were given in that moment?
There was definitely like some cognitive dissonance going on, you know, like he's just as much of a human. Yeah, he may have wings that pop out every once in a while, but he's just as much of a human as most people, even though Anya seems to think that he's perfect. It tries to be perfect. But so like
he does seem to have a little bit of a messiah complex.
So like comfortable bed, nice food, clean baths. You don't have to go bathe in a sewer infested river or sludge infested river, that kind of thing.
That's not bathing. I just want to point that out.
Well, when you grow up on the streets and stuff, you take what you can get. But yeah, no, he enjoyed like the creature comforts, but at the same time, it was like, who's cried and bled for this? Who am I taking advantage of?
Okay, so let's ask a two-tiered question here. It's gonna hit Patrick and it's gonna hit Mike, and we'll bounce back and forth on the answer here. We'll start with Patrick because Mike's got to step away for a second. But Kadiok's mug that he crafted for Drith, when he presents it to him, he mentions that in Norsean culture, there is a tradition of when you experience your first breaths with nature that you receive some sort of keepsake that, signifies, that documents that experience. Are Vorpal bunnies natural?
Great question. So, and the origin of Vorpal bunnies...
You gotta press your button.
Sorry, pressing the wrong button. So yeah, that's a great question. The origin of Vorpal bunnies... So, it's kind of a twofold origin. So the first origin of Vorpal bunnies is in my home campaign. I had just recently, you would be familiar with this, I just had recently gotten through a playthrough of Quest for Glory 4, and if you remember Quest for Glory 4, one of the enemies you can fight is basically a vampire bunny, and I thought the concept was absolutely hilarious, and I introduced it into my home campaign. The concept of these meat-eating bunnies that would just swarm you, and I obviously they weren't, playing Quest for Glory 4, they weren't deadly by themselves. You didn't fight more than one enemy at a time, so I built upon the concept of the fact that these Vorpal bunnies would swarm you all at once, and it has led to quite a few player deaths, and so
mostly Mike
player deaths, and so so it's just, and afterwards we just decided it was something that needed to be in every campaign at some point, was an appearance of the Vorpal bunnies, and that they were this a low level common enemy that you would find and be kind of like a nuisance, but in the world of Inara itself, the existence of the Vorpal bunnies is perversions of magic. It kind of depends on how you would classify it as a perversion of magic. Their origins would come from being twisted by the dark god Morpheus.
That would define perversion of magic to me.
So yeah, that would depend on your definition. To some people, a god created them, so maybe that's not a perversion of magic, but to some other people, a dark god created them, perversion of magic. So if that's what you would classify as a perversion of magic, then yeah, they are definitely perversions of magic. Morpheus decided to take some innocent rabbits and turn them into bloodthirsty, meat-eating creatures.
So that brings us to Kadiok. We've just had an admission that, canonically speaking, these are twisted creations of a dark god, but Kadiok referred to them as natural. Enlighten us a little bit on that somewhat concerning idea.
Sure thing. So, from the Norsean point of view, the elders are the ones, they created things, they started things, the path, they created the world, yada yada yada. Sylvana and Morpheus are both considered elders. They are the Morviran elders as opposed to Norsean elders, but they are still, they're on the same level as elders. If Sylvana was to come down and say hi to Kadiok, he would fall on the face and worship her just as much as anyone else would. But the idea of Vorpal bunnies being natural is that they have been around for long enough that they have a place in the ecosystem of Inara, and they are as much a part of nature as a wolf or a coyote or a regular bunny. So, it was, as far as he's concerned, at least some magic is natural. So if the reason why no one else has gotten something similar to the mug was that, you know, we've been fighting undead things, which are definitely not natural, or fighting, you know, profane guard, which are, you know, men, sentient beings. So he doesn't consider them to be parts, you know, of nature, so to speak. And all, and they're using various sorts of weapons that are okay. You don't find a sword growing on a tree, generally speaking. Patrick, you can make that canon if you wish. But generally speaking, there are not swords growing on trees. And so, if you know someone tries to kill you with a sword, that's not your first brush with death of nature. If a Vorpal bunny tries and rips your throat out, it's an animal. It's trying to kill you. It's nature trying to kill you.
I now want you, Patrick, as a request, just as people are walking through a town, just be like, and over there, you notice a sword tree.
The thought has occurred to me.
Okay, so we have covered Vorpal bunnies. I have decided that for my one-shot character, for your one-shot, I think he should have an enemy that is Vorpal bunnies, and he just wears like little Vorpal bunny skulls around his neck because he hates them. Because to him, they're unnatural. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about background. Let's jump out of this particular episode and let's just cover some sweeping topics as a whole. These are more unscripted topics. They're not going to necessarily be on the cheat sheet. So we'll just see how you guys react to some quick questions here. Start with Patrick. You are playing an online version of a TTRPG. Entirely online. You're all playing from the comfort of your whatever room you happen to be playing in at a given moment. In local game, when you have a secret for a player, you can walk a player out of the room and have a conversation. You can maybe pass a player a note, though for bigger secrets, you tend to walk people out of the room for, you know, tense scenes that other people aren't supposed to see between one or two players. You can have the other players leave the room. In an online game, that becomes harder because you're all in the same room. Have you ever considered having players remove their headphones and then signaling them back in when it's okay for them to come in? This is something I have done when I have run online RPGs, and especially online RPGs that are being watched by other people, because those are interactions that the audience needs to be privy to, but that the other players don't. And regardless of if someone is able to monitor their metagaming, right, it removes that sense of surprise. It removes that, oh wow, really kind of moment. So have you ever considered using a tool such as that in order to kind of enhance the quote unquote realism and the realistic reactions of your players?
To be 100% honest, no, I had not considered that until it had been brought up in, of course, the Rehash chat. Something I had not considered. You know, so that's definitely something that I'd be willing to do. Something that, you know, part of the thing though that one of the most irritating things for me as a DM and as a player is to, you know, if I as a DM dish out information and be like, hey, there's this thing that you need to know about, and dish it to the player, and like it takes like, you know, it might take like 2-3 minutes for me to dish out this information, and then the player just turns around and dishes out the same 2-3 minute long explanation to another player, and when you could just say, I just told you what the DM just told me. And so...
And so to clarify, just as someone who, I didn't invent the tool, but I definitely popularized the tool with Due Respite, was you only did it for big, like the Zelania conversation with her sister, right? All of that information was information that didn't need to ever come to the player, to the other players. It's a 100% private conversation between Lydia's character and her character's NPC relation. And information came up in that discussion that, you know, specifically about like the state of the leader of the house, who had been more injured in the attack than anyone had let on. that information never necessarily had to get shared by Jelania at all. But even subconsciously now, other players know, right? So in that situation, in a situation where it's like, hey, you've walked in the other room and I'm going to outline the plan for you, now go back and tell everybody, that's a different thing. But for those kind of intense moments, or for any of the circumstances where, Artyom walked off last episode, a couple episodes ago, and people went to talk to him, those are examples of when those conversations are private. And so I was just curious if it was something that you had considered.
Yeah, no, it wasn't something that I had considered. Definitely something I'd be willing to do for those kind of situations. I would kind of almost leave it up to the player to request it. Almost. I mean, maybe I'd have to think about it a little bit more, just because I would, I would think I would want I'd leave it up to the player to be like, hey, this is something that I only want to happen between me and this person, or me and you, and something like that. So it's definitely something I'd be willing to do. Something that has not occurred to me before that moment to do.
So, Mike and Adam, how do you guys feel about the idea as players? If you were in a situation where, Patrick, brought in an NPC and, said, I'm going to take Piotr, so-and-so takes Piotr off into another room, and he looked at you and he says, if you're not Piotr, take your headphones off. I'll thumbs up you to come back in, so watch your camera. How would you feel as players about that as a thing?
Something, and the audience doesn't see it because it's in our debrief at the end of every episode, at least for me, that I enjoy, is like, we all have our own kind of rehash discussion of the episode afterwards. And so all of these things that we hear lead to a lot of excitement and interaction between us as friends after the fact. I think it makes you're making a valid story argument with the everybody take off your headset, and then when the time comes out in the future, then it's more of a, oh my goodness, an actual character reaction, as opposed to an Adam reacting to the fact that Kadiak has a magical hidden third arm or something. I don't know, but I think it could be a very useful tool, but at the same time, I think it could possibly be a little bit of a distraction, and it would definitely take some practice. Maybe Patrick would have to get up and pull the sword out from behind the shield behind him in order to get people's attention. But I don't know. I would definitely want to give it a shot first and see what happened.
Yeah, I'd say that it would have to be an every once in a while thing, probably, for me, because I really enjoy as a player, and as a player, we're still watching the rest of the story as well, and so getting to see Adam's interactions with his Angel and Corbett's with his is really cool. Seeing how the character grows, even if my character isn't actively interacting with him at the time. But I can definitely see the shock and awe value that could come from, oh hey, the king is going to take a single member of the party out, and then 3 sessions down the line, it's like, oh, so-and-so kills the king because of what he said, and everyone's like, what happened, and yada yada yada. So that could be, I could definitely see that being an interesting dynamic, but again, yeah, I'd have to see it in action probably.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's definitely one of those things that is situational, because I do understand the interacting with the scene as a spectator as well. So it's definitely not something you do every time. So let's talk for a second about Piotr. Ian was going to join us, but didn't get to. He had something come up, it seems like. Piotr's a character who seems to have a lot going on in his head, fairly regularly. And there's always kind of this enigma to Piotr when he interacts with the world. Do we as a party see that coming to the forefront anytime soon? Do you as characters ever feel the need to, or the urge to draw Piotr out of that shell? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
Well, I think so. There's a combination of things here going on. So I've played with Ian for, more than half a decade at this point. And one of my favorite things about Piotr is it seems to be Ian's most fleshed out and interesting character that he's made. And so it's like, it's awesome to see the growth from someone who is casually interested in Dungeons and Dragons and was invited to come play in a home game to someone who's comfortable enough with it to get up on the internet where anybody who clicks on the link could watch it. But as for Piotr in particular, I have the feeling that he's kind of waiting for his moment. We've touched on a few of Piotr's backstory elements, but at the same time, I don't feel like we've quite gotten there yet. We've done some stuff with Anya, we've done some stuff with Corvette, we've done some stuff with Artyom, we're doing some stuff with Kadiak. I think Piotr and Drith's moments are coming, and once those come, it'll be a lot easier. But as of right now, Artyom knows two big things about him. One, there was some form of accidental death / intentional murder involved in Piotr's backstory. And then he ran in high circles that he's not a fan of. So he is just as apprehensive about Piotr as he is about Corvette and as he is about Anya. But me as Adam is interested to see what Ian is, just getting ready to show us. Because I think he's just waiting for the right moment.
Yeah, Ian and I actually had an interesting conversation after the session last week. He's played in a few games with me, obviously before. We've been playing together for more than a decade, and it was when he learned the information about Podara. He was like, wow, I didn't realize that our character backstories were going to play as huge of a central story, or it was Podara, Vitali, looking at all this stuff, and he's like, I just thought this was all kind of background, gonna ultimately end up being side quest stuff that if we decided to deal with or not. I didn't think it was gonna be main story. And it was like, no, I'm working really hard to integrate everyone's backstories into the main story. And so it's an interesting, so his moment is coming, just maybe not as soon as other people's moments, definitely.
Piotr is a character who, as a bystander, as a spectator, strikes me as someone with an incredibly deep, dark secret. But speaking of deep, dark secrets, early in the session, Drith announced to the party casually that his father used to set him on fire. Let me repeat that for the necessary dramatic. His father used to set him on fire.
I think it was his stepfather, actually. There's a big difference there because he's looking for his real father.
Regardless, still bad, still terrifying.
Oh, yes, definitely.
And I would like to cover the fact that how incredibly disappointed with the party I was that we just casually let that go as much as we did. I feel like that should have been sorry, hold up. Let's circle back and cover this as a thing. How did that make party members feel in character? How did that make players feel in character? And as his party members / becoming his, albeit mistrustful, third eye having friends, are we hunting this man down at some point in the future?
I mean, the Kingdom Mithra just sounds really jacked up from what, Luke has been telling us. At the same time, it's kind of like, well, what do you want me to do about that? Like, it, and I think part of it is, it's the game, right? Luke makes comments that everybody kind of laughs at, and then we don't really, think too much about it. But to be honest, I was like, oh yeah, it's Luke, it's Drith, it's funny, but then it's, pointing it out now, no, that's not funny at all.
And it might just be different backgrounds of how I play in and run games. But those kind of comments are the kind of things that you can't make those comments offhand, because those comments become canon in that moment. And I think Patrick operates that same thing. So even if Luke was totally joking, right? Even if Luke was like, oh yeah, stepdad used to set me on fire. I'm very uncomfortable in this house, right? Patrick is now like writing down notes. Stepfather used to set Drith on fire, right? Like, that's now a thing.
And honestly, I use that to my advantage sometimes. The fact that Patrick does play like that. There have been a few things that Kadiak has brought into canon through conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, like the blue moss that stops bleeding. But I believe that the mug was given to Drith either directly after or maybe like right before that comment. And Kadiak has definitely made note that once the current crisis is over, that he's already started to try and bring Drith along with him, and because Drith seems a lot like one of Kadiak's little brothers. He's one of 13 siblings, so he has a lot of siblings. So Drith seems like Drith acts a lot like one of his brothers, and Kadiak doesn't take kindly to the fact that he was lit on fire as a child. Drith, that is. So, Kadiak has definitely made note of it and is planning an excursion with Drith back to his homeland once the current, looming threat of a dark god being reborn is no more, and he can deal with more mundane problems such as fire torturing stepfathers.
Until you learn that said fire torturing stepfathers were all just performing evil rituals in the first place.
Yeah.
The big issue that the party would have. So Nithra is a community in the Kingdom of Antaran, and the Kingdom of Antaran is a very loose term. It's more of a nation of druids who decide, sure, we'll work together. So the big issue they would have is that's an entire continent away, like an entire ocean, so they have to sail across the ocean, which is 100% doable if that's what they decide they want to do. But, like saying, I have two players who I always have to just be watching what they're saying, because they can just say anything. Like, most everyone else will ask me, he's like, is it okay if I say this thing first? Now, Luke and Mike will just be like, mouth spew, and it's like, crap, write it down.
You got to learn real quick to be good on the, well, actually, this is you're remembering this incorrectly, and then fill in the blank so it falls a little bit in more line with what you already have planned.
Exactly. And so, like, when we first talked about it, it was because Drith is a half-elf, and so the community of Nithra is a pure elven, and so the fact that Drith is a half-elf is, it's supposed to be that, his father disliked him because of his elven blood, and it just kind of evolved from there to abusive than his stepfather, and so I'm sure it is definitely something we want to deal with at some point, because we should just let comments like those slide.
I think it creates an interesting dynamic for RTM, right? Because he is very much he wants to be a champion for the underdog, but because his reaction is, can I fix it with healing magic or can I smash it with my hammer? When it comes to emotions and mental and emotional trauma, he's just as clueless about it as I am as a person. It's one of the flaws of being me playing a character, but at the same time it's also because of it works well because of how he grew up. And so you asked how it affects our characters, how it impacted our characters. RTM just doesn't know what can I really do about it. His Drith has had some of these kind of sadder moments where you see probably a little bit more what Luke has in mind for the character, but at the same time, because so much of Drith is happy, excited, bubbly, look at all this stuff that I'm seeing and all this stuff that I'm learning, it keeps RTM kind of off balance. Who's the real Drith? Is it this sad child that has been lit on fire, or is it this super excited, the world is wonderful and everything is bright and shiny and let me write it all down person? And he has no idea how to react to him. RTM can respect Kadiak as a warrior. He has his back and forth with Anya. He's got the ASMR connection with Corvette, and he appreciates Piotr, since Piotr was really the first to reach out to him when he thought he was going to leave, but he really doesn't have a lot to connect with on Drith, so he has no idea what to do about the fact that Drith seems to have one of the harder back stories.
So here's the question for the other two players involved, and I think Mike already answered it, so we'll ask Adam, because Mike's on the let's go hunt this guy down train. Do you buy it, right? Or did he have the rough childhood because he was the half-elf, but was it not the abusive, hellacious experience that he describes? You guys insight check each other regularly, but never about Drith's abuse. Do you buy it?
Yeah, I buy it. The kind of... So part of RTM's backstory I mentioned is growing up on the streets, right? And that means that he's seen how the adult world can be cruel to unwanted children. And so it doesn't surprise him at all that someone who's supposed to love and care and nurture for a child doesn't.
Okay.
What I'm really curious about is Drith described his mother as extremely loving, but if Drith's mother really allowed this to happen, how loving?
Oh, I mean, it just means that the dad was just as abusive to her as he was to Drith, right?
I just think it'd be interesting if we were eventually to get some of Drith's opinion on that.
I mean, why is it that Drith is not horrendously scarred from being set on fire? It sounds like his mother was taking care of him to me, but the heels afterward kind of a thing. Well, that's what I've got in terms of questions. So we're gonna segue on out here. You guys are back on Wednesday, not this next coming Wednesday, but the one after, correct?
Yep.
So, no show this coming week on Wednesday, so no show on the 17th, but ready to roll. We'll be back in action on February 24th. So be ready for that. However, leading up to that, there will be an in-universe Inara-based one-shot on Saturday the 20th that I will be appearing in. Lydia will be there. Adam will be there. And then a new face to the channel, a friend of mine named Sarah, will be there to play. So come tune in for that. It's called The Darkest Devotion. And then, as always, you can catch the various streams that Patrick does of various video games here on the channel as well as the things that Lydia does over on Stay at Home DM. So until next time, for the Ready to Roll cast and crew, I've been your host, Eric Taylor. Good night, good luck, stay safe and stay healthy, and we will catch you all next time. See you later, everybody.